So today we're talking about faith and politics. I know it's going to be boring because nothing politically interesting has been happening anytime soon. I know all of y'all are old enough now to realize that, more things change, the more they stay the same, and you've seen the ups and downs of politics. I'd just like to remind you, however, God's been dealing with us trying to manage ourselves for a long time. Last week was actually the real New Year. It is now 6775 in the Assyrian calendar. The Happy Akitu, this is the oldest known festival in humanity. And this is how long God's been looking at humanity going, what? You're trying that? Oh, no. So just want to know that it's okay. God's still in control. And things just come out on a longer timeline than we might think. Now, faith and politics. We're covering here 1 Peter 2, verses 13 through 25. Submit yourselves. Remember last week, submit, that wonderful word we all love. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human authority. Every human authority. Whether to the emperor as the supreme authority or to governors who are sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to command those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing you should silence the ignorant talk of foolish people. Live as free people, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as God's slaves. Show proper respect for everyone. Love the family of believers. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering, because they are conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin. No deceit was found in his mouth. And when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you've returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. How many sermons do you hear on this one? Yeah, this is not one of our top 10 list. I haven't seen any athletes putting 1 Peter 2, 13 through 25 underneath their eyes, okay? But for right now, I want you to think about politics and choose your worst president in your mind. Who was the absolute worst? I think we can all agree that it was Chester Arthur. No? I mean, come on, guys. I don't care who you think was the worst president. They weren't as bad as Nero. It would be safe to say that Christians in the first century did not agree with Nero's politics. As Nero was emperor, they certainly didn't vote for him. He's not my emperor. I'm sure they had shirts made up like that for their togas. Nero is immoral. He was unethical. He hated Christians. He was batting 1,000. Let's go through some of his greatest hits parade. Matricide. Got rid of mom. Because, she disagreed with him. So, he had his former freedman, Anciatus, arrange a shipwreck, which she happened to survive. She survived it. So, she then swam ashore, and his buddy killed her and reported her death as a suicide. Just everyday politics in Rome. Then he got married. He didn't like her, so he just had her executed. Then got married again. And when she was pregnant, she disagreed with him about something. He flew into a rage and stomped and beat on her abdomen until she and the baby were dead. A little bit later, he sort of felt bad for that. So he married Sporus, a young boy who he had castrated, put into a wedding gown, and married him with all the usual ceremonies because he looked like Poppaea. As Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. Issues of transgenderism and the like have been going on for a while, but this is the guy's greatest hits. And we're not getting into the rest of it. This is Nero. And this is who 1 Peter said, obey the authorities. And Peter's advice about Nero was, get on Facebook and complain about the emperor. That is God's calling to you. God Peter told Christians to submit to the kings and the governors because government is the will of God. Ugh. This doesn't mean that God chose all those leaders or that they were doing His will. Okay? It was not God's will that Nero execute Christians, just like it was neither God's idea for what Hitler was doing, or Pol Pot, or Saddam Hussein, or the Turks in World War I, or all these. You know, if you were taught history, like I was taught history, it was by your football coach who was a sentence or a paragraph ahead of you. And so you sort of got this idea that the world is a good place until the Germans in World War II and Hitler. But other than that, everybody's been doing good throughout history. No, it's not. History is replete with people that make Hitler look like an altar boy. Okay? But even during that persecution, the church grew. And the church overthrew the most powerful empire on earth because people did what God commanded. And that was go be thrown to the lions at the circuses and not scream and rant, but bend over and pray and thank God as you were ripped by lions. Oops. Sorry. Oops. Sorry. Why is this? Oh, there it is. Gotcha. My screen was acting up here. Be subject to the government. But why? Why? We're Americans. We were too cool for the British, so we had to get rid of them. Come on. We didn't want all that tea. We needed coffee. So subject to a government who's dedicated to Christianity's demise, why in the world would they or we do that? Romans 13, 1 and 2. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. We don't like that. And Peter gives two good reasons to submit to the government. First and foremost, this is the will of God. Any questions? If you've been in church any length of time, you've heard somebody say the phrase, God said it, I believe it, that settles it, right? Did you ever hear any minister read this verse and say that? But we're Americans. We get to gripe and complain about our government. It's our God-given right. Just like as Texans, it's our God-given right to park ourselves in the left lane and the passing lane, regardless of how fast we're going. Second, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Because we are to be subject to authority, because in doing so it speaks volumes about our faith. Our faith in what? Our faith that God will take care of things and not politics. That's what the root of this is. We'll get into this later. As Christians in America, should we be involved in politics? Absolutely. You should be involved in politics and support those people who you believe best reflect what your understanding of God and Christianity is. Absolutely. But let me also make this clear. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care which political party you belong to. I don't care if what you think is going on right now is good, bad, or indifferent. The bottom line is politics won't save us. God will. And what are we going to put our faith in? Are we going to trust that God will take care of us whether or not there's inflation, whether or not there's a recession, whether or not fill in the blank? Or are we going to say, boy, we've got to get in X person or else things are going to fall apart? But wait. Come on, Prator. We're still Americans. There's an exception, right? There's an exception to our subjection to government, and it's not whenever government is oppressive, obstinate, or imposing things on us we don't want. Because what if a government is a totalitarian, evil, tyrannical, and the ruler's acting like an emperor, like Nero? And that's what Peter told the people. But I mean, you don't understand. I enjoy my Facebook postings. I enjoy taking it to fill in the blank. What's the barrier line here? Faith in government. Well, since I love movies, let me show you one. Chariots of Fire. Now again, last week I mentioned that half my undergraduates haven't seen Star Wars or Star Trek, so I don't even want to deign to think if they've seen this. But to remind you, Eric Liddell was the championship runner from Scotland, and he was going to run for the English team in the Olympics right after World War I. Okay? And he found out the heat would be on Sunday, and he refused. They are now in Paris, and he's being called up by the head of the British Olympic Committee, and he's being asked to discuss his ideas with, the future king. No pressure. First, I think all business meetings should be held like that. Top hat, tails, etc. Secondly, it's been a while since I saw the movie, so I just took this clip. Sorry for the cursing. I don't have a way to edit this, so go through. But this was real. He did win that race. In fact, he didn't just win it. He set a world record that held for another 3 Olympics. And he was offered the equivalent of millions of dollars in endorsements and everything else. And instead he said, nope, I'm going back to be a missionary in China, where he was born. And he was there when World War II started, and he got his wife and children out, but he stayed in the concentration camp with his flock, and he died there of a brain tumor. God, then country. Remember Bob and Doris Fraser? They worked with the children that he educated in that concentration camp. Not only was he a great athlete, a great minister, but from memory he wrote down books on chemistry and the like, and he taught the kids there. And when they got out, several of them took the placement exams for entrance into Harvard and got the highest scores and were accepted into Harvard on full scholarships. Okay? And he kept serving people there while he was dying of a brain tumor. One gentleman who was in the camp said the following: I'm not a Christian, but I saw a true angel from God during that time. As Christians, we should put God before government. Period. End of discussion. No other debate. How do we do that? Well, that's for each of us to work out on our own, as we work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. As Americans, we can and should be involved in the political process. Absolutely. But as the early Christians did, we should stand apart in how we interact and how we approach politics. So some ideas. This is the gospel according to Edmund, and I'm not inspired. Okay? Just some ideas to consider. Vote your conscience. However, don't judge those Christians who vote differently from you. They're voting their conscience as well. If you say you put God before politics, ask yourself this: are you a straight party ticket voter of I don't care which party? Are you a straight party ticket voter? Then perhaps, just perhaps, you're putting politics above God rather than assessing each candidate on their beliefs and what they are standing for. The best, most modern example I can give you is Abraham Lincoln. The North was fighting to free the slaves. That seems like a straightforward moral statement, right? So God had to be on the Republican side, right? Before a major battle, one of Lincoln's supporters told him this: "Don't worry, God is on our side." Lincoln's response was this: "I don't know, but I certainly hope we are on his side." I think that pretty much sums up 1 Peter. Okay? This is private correspondence that was given by one of his secretaries, John Hay, that was published after his death. This fragment was found and preserved by John Hay, one of President Lincoln's White House secretaries, who said, "It was not written to be seen of men. Mr. Lincoln admits us into the most secret recess of his soul, perplexed and afflicted beyond the power of human help by the disasters of war, the wrangling of parties, and the inexorable and constraining logic of his own mind. He shut out the world one day and tried to put into form his double sense of responsibility to human duty and divine power. And this was the result. It shows, as has been said in another place, the awful sincerity of a perfectly honest soul, trying to bring itself into closer communion with its Maker." And he wrote this: "The will of God prevails. In great contests, each party claims to act in accordance with the will of God. Both may be, and one must be, wrong. God cannot be for and against the same thing at the same time. In the present civil war, it is quite possible that God's purpose is something different from the purpose of either party. And yet, the human instrumentalities, working just as they do, are the best adaptation to effect His purpose. Just like in the first century, Nero killing people was not God's will, but God used it and the Christians' response to change the viewpoint of the Roman people and to change the Roman Empire. And yet, His purpose, I am almost ready to say that this is probably true, that God wills this contest and wills that it shall not end. By His mere great power on the minds of the now contestants, He could have either saved or destroyed the Union without a human contest. Yet the contest began. And having begun, He could give the final victory to either side any day. And yet the contest proceeds. And He took these ideas and He expanded them further. And on His second inaugural address, He said the following. Sorry, I'll read it. I'm not saying y'all are old or your eyesight's bad. I'll just read it. Okay. Fellow countrymen, at this second appearing to take the oath of the presidential office, there is less occasion for an extended address than there was at the first. Then a statement somewhat in detail of the course to be pursued seemed fitting and proper. But now, at the expiration of 4 years, during which public declarations have been constantly called forth on every point and phrase of the great contest, which still absorbs the attention and engrosses the energies of the nation, little that is new could be presented. Sort of sounds like today and social media, doesn't it? Everything that could be said has been said. The progress of our arms, upon which all else chiefly depends, is as well known to the public as to myself. And it is, I trust, reasonably satisfactory and encouraging to all. With high hope for the future, no prediction in regard to it is ventured. Now, on the occasion corresponding to this 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to the impending Civil War. All dreaded it. All sought to avert it. And while the inaugural address was being delivered from this place, devoted altogether to saving the Union without war, insurgent agents were in the city seeking to destroy it without war, seeking to dissolve the Union and divide effects by negotiation. Both parties deprecated war, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest. All knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend his interest was the object of which the insurgents would rend this Union, even by war, while the government claimed no right to do more than to restrict the territorial enlargement of it. Neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Neither anticipated that the cause of the conflict might cease with, or even before the conflict should itself cease. Each looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invoke his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any man should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces, but let us judge not, that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. Those of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. If we shall suppose that he now wills to remove, and that he gives to both north and south this terrible war, as the woe due to those by whom the offense came, shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in a living God always subscribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this mighty scourge of war may speedily pass away. Yet, if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and into every drop of blood drawn from the lash shall be paid by another drawn from the sword, as was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said today. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice towards none. With malice towards none. Charity for all. Firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, for his widow and his orphan, to do all which we may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. That, of course, was written in the 1800s, but I think it is just as applicable today. We, as Christians, American Christians, should be involved in politics. But never forget, God and our duty to set his example, not our preferences, is what must lead our daily, everyday interactions with people. Because to be perfectly honest, what's more important? Bringing people to Christ or getting our politicians elected? That's what I'd like you to consider. And now this afternoon you can go back and read Lincoln. Okay? Because we live in a difficult age. We're all yelling at each other. We're all upset. Emotions are high. And yet, luckily, in this country, we do not fight our civil wars with AK-47s. We do it at the ballot box. So by all means, go to the ballot box, all right? But by all means, remember that we as Christians serve God first. So you might want to go back and after reading a little bit of Lincoln, go back and watch Chariots of Fire. And show your grandchildren that and Star Wars and Star Trek. All right? Y'all have a good week.